6, 5, all of DC. I am Pastor Cliff Beckford. On behalf of Overseer Eugene Shepherd, we want to welcome you to the candidate forum here at Living Word Church. Let's give God a round of applause. Amen. As customary in this house, we'd like for you to stand for our opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for a day that we have not ever seen before. You told us that for each day we should rejoice and be glad in it. God, as you have brought these individuals, politicians, council members together to express their thoughts for this city, Lord, we pray for the wisdom and guidance of Solomon. Father, we thank you, oh God, for so many things, oh God. We thank you for the mayor of this city, the president of this nation, the cabinet. Lord, we ask you to look over this forum. Let your will be done. In Jesus' name is my prayer. And all of God's people said, amen. I want to bring up Ambrose Lane for continuance of this program.
Thank you, Pastor. Let me first say thank you to Pastor Beckford and the Living Word Church family for the gracious hospitality for this event. Please give the pastor a hand. I also want to thank Million Man Vote for their support and guidance in creating this forum, and our co-moderators from the Washington Informer, reporter Sam P.K. Collins for his collaboration and support, and Sam Ford, former bureau chief at WJLA, for his participation as well, and the other organizations that supported this event, and of course the residents and communities themselves concerned about the future of Ward 8 and of Washington, D.C. My name is Ambrose Lane Jr. I am lead organizer for Million Man Vote, which is an organization with a general focus and purpose of registering Black men to vote in elections at the local, state, and national level in all jurisdictions, to advocate to and educate Black men on issues of importance to Black men and the Black community, and to develop an actionable Black man's agenda around those issues, to educate Black men about the value, importance, and impact of their vote and their participation in the electoral process, to educate Black men in all jurisdictions about voter eligibility, registration, and the voting process, to educate Black men about candidates and their political issues and their positions, to lobby regarding proposed national legislation when appropriate and as determined by the Million Man Vote leadership, and to follow the IRS guidelines regarding lobbying. And lastly, to provide Black men voter logistical information in jurisdictions that will encourage maximum participation at the polls and in the voting process. The rules of this candidate forum. Each participating candidate's name will be announced at the beginning of the forum. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes for an opening statement. Each candidate will take turns answering moderator questions first, with candidates to their right answering next. Candidates will have up to 90 seconds to answer the moderator's question. We have a timekeeper here. His name is Rashad Burks. Please raise your hand, Rashad. Rashad is here with Million Man Vote, but I also want to say he just received, and I said this last week, but he just received acceptance at Cornell University Law School. After the candidates have answered the moderator questions, each candidate will have an opportunity to rebut the answer of another candidate. The rebuttal time cannot exceed 30 seconds. Only one rebuttal is permitted, so you can't rebut more than one candidate. Rebuttals cannot be in the form of a question. Candidates may not rebut more than one other candidate's answer. After rounds of questions from the moderators, up to 2 rounds of audience questions will be taken by the lead moderator. Round 1 will be questions from specific community representatives in round 2, time permitting, will be from the general audience members. Candidates' answers to the audience questions shall not exceed 45 seconds. Candidates will have no rebuttal during audience questions. A bullet and targeted round from the moderators will follow audience questions, time permitting. The bullet target round, candidate answers will require a yes or no answer or be no longer than 15 seconds, depending on the question. There will be no rebuttals. Candidates will then receive a 1 minute for closing remarks. So let's bring up our candidates, and as I call each name, please give them a hand. Rahman Branch. Nate Deringue, did I pronounce that right? Deringue, please have a seat. Salim Adolfo. Councilmember Trayon White. Please sit in the order that you were called. So Salim, I need you to know that. It's all right. The first round of questions, we will begin with Sam Ford. I will follow Sam, and Sam Collins will follow me, and it will remain in that order.
Well, hello, and you actually live in Ward 6, but I don't think I know anybody in Ward 6. I tell everybody in Ward 8 because I'm over here, so much. So it's kind of interesting. Although when I moved to Washington, and I calculated about 42 years ago, this area of Anacostia, downtown Anacostia, that area there, Good Hope Road, or Berry Avenue now, Martin Luther King, that intersection, that was Ward 6 at that time. And so, when you think about it, and I look at the population when I moved here in 82 was roughly the same as it is now in DC, except that, again, there were Wards 7 and 8 on this side of the river and part of Ward 6. Now, 7 and 8 have to reach over to the other side of the river in order to have enough residents for a ward. So my question is, what do you attribute this change to, and do you think it will ever turn around? That's my question. I'll start with Mr. Branch, I guess, and we'll just go that way. Is that right? Okay. I say Mr. Branch because we were at Ballou High School, right? He was the principal, and I only call him Mr. Branch.
So thank you for the question, and thank you for having us. Ultimately, I believe that the change can be attributed to a few things. I think there is a time in DC where our population actually declined, and then as it grew again, we see the numbers that we have now. When we talk about residents and why we have to reach over the water, I think a lot of that is aligned to the amount of housing that we have in the ward that it's uninhabitable. So we can't have residents in those spaces and places. And so the reach comes from making sure that the redistricting puts an equal amount of residents in each ward. But our ward has so many properties that can have residents in it if we fixed and restored housing, that then there wouldn't be as much of a need to reach over. But, I think at the end of the day, welcoming the diversity of thought, the diversity of experiences is also good for our ward as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nate Deringue. I am less concerned of why the major factors of why people move. I think when people move, they have many different reasons. And hopefully it's so they can go to a place where they can thrive better and support their families more. And so whatever reason people move, if it's out of DC or a different part of DC, I think that's great. And I think the role of the local government is to make sure public safety is there, make sure there's public goods and services that can accommodate on things that the government should be providing. I know one reason why people move. I think of one of the council hearings when DC Council was mandating COVID shots for school children. And even I think someone on this table here passed legislation that said kids could get shots without their parents' consent up to, I think, age 12. And so I remember hearing one father during a hearing say, hey, if you make this policy, I'm going to leave. So a lot of reasons why people leave the district is because of bad policy that doesn't protect the children. So that's my answer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Salim Adolfo. To answer your question, there's a variety of issues. We have apartment complexes such as Marbury Plaza or Wingate, which is right down the street, that have a plethora of issues as to where we have property owners who are negligent and to some degree purposefully negligent as to force people to do what we call self-evict. So they won't repair these buildings and these properties to get people to want to move out so that they can tear them down and redevelop them into some of the things that we see, which is now across the water into Navy Yard. But we look at Washington, D.C., and we see that this is an opportunity for people to come literally from all across the globe to live here and to be a part of the rich history and the rich culture of this city. And we see population spur up in what is now Navy Yard, which wasn't as developed probably when you came decades ago to what we see now. And so we see people who want to participate and be a part of the rich lives that you get an opportunity to participate in by living in this city. But I think ultimately what we have to do is find ways to make sure that people who want to be in this community can stay in this community and make sure that they get to access to quality housing. Quality housing is a human right, and it is our responsibility to make sure that we can hold the property owners accountable to making sure they deliver on that human right.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
First of all, we know that every 10 years, DC goes through what is known as redistricting. We have the right size to Washington, DC, according to our population to fit 2,000 people in every single member district. And that includes all parts of DC, not just Ward 8. Fortunately and unfortunately, that is a tough process because people have to be change their ANC or change their voter registration. Their voter registration is affected by what ward they live in. But as leaders, we have to adjust to the population because we serve those who are in our jurisdiction. I believe that one of the things we have focused on and need to focus on is housing equity. Historically, we lost 20,000 Black residents in the last 10 years. And that's those who are documented, not even including those who are couch surfing, homeless, or feeling hopeless or unhoused in Washington, D.C. And so I think we have started the conversation about housing equity. We have a long way to go. We just received a budget in which the Housing Production Trust Fund, the money that was designed to help fix up low income affordable housing, has been cut by $40 million. We see that money for home ownership. There are a lot of Black homeowners who wanted to get houses in DC. That's what we need to be focused on. I work with Pastor Beckford here and Lydia's house to ensure that not just we just not renting all the time and spending our money and throwing it in a black hole, but we have ownership and have equity and can build wealth here in Ward 8. And so that's been our focus. I put money into what is now called the Douglas Community Land Trust to empower people that we can own our own homes here and stay here, and also business ownership. And that's truly been my focus and our focus here in Ward in the last couple of years to ensure that we can have strong community and have strong family from which we came. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a rebuttal real quick?
I was getting ready to ask, are there any rebuttals?
Yes, it is. Nate says something about the vote on the council. He said only member was a member up here. I'm the only council member on this panel, and I was the one vote who voted no to concede to give the school system the right to give our students vaccines. It was 12-1. This document, you can Google it right now. I don't believe that the government should be making decisions for our children as parents, and our children have different health ailments, have different allergies to different things, and so the school should not be making decisions without the parents' consent about vaccines or shots or anything. So I was the one vote on that council for clarity.
Thank you. Are there any other rebuttals?
So, thanks, Ryan, for that.
Are there any other rebuttals? You have a rebuttal. You have one rebuttal.
I just want to say thanks, Trion. I do recall that there's a lot of policies where you do stand up, and I like it. A lot of them, I think you're with the other 11 members. But on that one, I'd like to thank you. Everybody wants me.
All right, let me remind everyone first that the timekeeper, when he gets to 15 seconds before your time's up, he will raise his hand. Timekeeper is right there. At the end of your time, the timekeeper will say time, and if you can't stop, then I'm going to say time. And then lastly, for everyone in the audience, this is being recorded and it will be being streamed as well. Once this is complete, we will send the link to the recording out to everyone so that you can see it another time and other people can see it and you can share it. Okay, just wanted to say that. Next question. In the District of Columbia, as well as in Ward 8, Black males have the highest rates of incarceration, the highest rates of unemployment, the highest rates of opioid use, and the lowest rates of graduation of any demographic group. What current resources will you apply, or what new resources will you create to address and change these outcomes? This question goes to Nate, and it goes down the line.
I think with certain ways you can look at statistics, you can identify variables and say, look at this variable and look at all these disparities. And then you can conclude that there's some form of institutionalized systemic oppression about that variable. But I'd like to bring up a different variable that is relevant for all these disparities. And that's the variable of having a strong family with two parents married, husband and wife. And when you have strong parents, the data shows, I'm thinking about Brookings Institute and a host of other universities, that childhood outcomes are the best with two-parent households. And so I think if we look at a racial lens and then try to create solutions based on a thing that we really should do a multivariate analysis upon, which means we got to look at other things, just not assume everything's about race when we see disparities. Because then when we make programs and policies based on these assumptions that may not be true, I think that's how we really mess things up in the future with policies that create programs and spend money and just can really exacerbate current problems. DC's been run by Democrats for as long as I've been here and earlier, and the state of it really hasn't improved in my personal experience. So I think we need a new paradigm.
Can you repeat the question, please?
In the District of Columbia, as well as in Ward 8, Black males have the highest rates of incarceration, the highest rates of unemployment, the highest rates of opioid use, the lowest rates of graduation of any demographic group. What current resources will you apply, or what new resources will you create to address and change these outcomes?
All right, thank you. For those that just walked in, once again, my name is Salim Adolfo. Currently, I'm the chair of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8C. And I think that we have to apply a variety of different things simultaneously. For example, right at the intersection, right in Congress Heights, we have the workforce development component of UDC. It's free for all district residents. So we should make sure that the outreach is done there for those that may not want to pursue a traditional four-year degree. We also have the DC Futures Program, which is a scholarship that is available for DC residents to attend UDC, to attend some of the other universities. And it's a scholarship for $4,000 a semester, which also gives you a stipend and gives you books. So I think that that's something that we need to push to make sure that our folks can get into these spaces. But even taking it a step further, we have a variety of different organizations, fraternities, sororities. We also have mentoring groups such as the one you're a part of to make sure that our folks at the elementary school level, middle school level, and high school level can get the continued support that they need throughout the educational process to get them on the track to pursue higher education. We also have the school year internship program. We know about the summer youth employment program, but the school year internship program is an opportunity throughout the entire school year to make sure that our children are engaged in pathways to careers and other opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm as you can see, African-American young man that grew up in this community. And I've seen what mass incarceration has did to the Black community, not just here in Washington, D.C., but every major Black community across the nation. Quite frankly, a lot of our men went to jail. We make up 2.1 million incarcerated individuals. And so the laws was never fair for us. And you know what happened with the 80s and 90s and crack. We never fully recovered from the crack epidemic that's what Washington, D.C. that leads to what we call broken families and broken homes. I remember when I used to go next door and knock on people's doors and talk to my neighbors, and everybody would sit to my auntie, my grandmother in the neighborhood. That's a day long gone. And so we have to get back to that foundation. The question is, what would I do and what would I do? But the question is, what have I done? And so one of the things I did was try to level the playing field. We have a preference point for DC residents to get DC government jobs, but that anybody can move in DC and get preference for residency and they still not get the job. or get the job. And so what I did was I added a point preference for those who graduated from high school, because we want to make sure those residents who we educate, tell to go to school, do the right things, take the SATs, do all the things you ask them to do, get opportunities in our city. Quite frankly, we give more opportunity to people outside of DC than people inside of DC. And so that's one thing I did. One of the other things is I started a mentoring program inside of our local middle schools called Heroes DC, and which Jerry Simmons is a part of. And lastly, before I close, I made sure we had an infrastructure academy here in Ward 8. They, not just jobs, but access to careers and employment here in Ward 8 that's equitable, that we can live here and thrive here, not to be surviving here in the district.
Thank you for the question. Ultimately, I think one of the things that stand out to me is the statistic. In Washington, D.C., Black boys graduate on time at a rate of 37%. From a SHOT report produced in 2018, 37%. I don't believe that Black boys and men have a genetic predisposition to failure. Because I don't believe that, I recognize the problems are the way that we engage, educate, inform, and participate in the lives of Black people, specifically Black males in DC. I have a son who's in high school, and I often think about what I would want for my son is the same thing I want for every son, for every young man that was a student of mine at Blue High School for nearly a decade. And I think those look like opportunities like a strong and robust CTE program for those who aren't going to college track. We were committed to graduating globally competitive young people. You do that by making sure those who go to college and those who don't all can participate in the kind of economy that we're creating here in DC. We have to make sure that we're training teachers around the skill sets that they need to engage with our young people well. I can't tell you how many times parents have come to me and said, Mr. Branch, my child did so good until about 5th grade and something kind of happened and I don't know why, right? There's data that shows that if teachers had the skill sets to engage young people, they'd be much more successful in how they work with our children and work for our children. And then in closing, I think there are organizations that already exist, DOES, DBH, DCHA, who can all engage in the process of supporting Black men in a much healthier fashion.
Are there any rebuttals? Next question.
Peace and blessings. My question, and we'll start with Celine first. If each of y'all could please describe your multi-agency public health response to opioid use and violent crime in Ward 8. Multi-agency public health focused response.
All right, that's a very good question. So when I look at that, I would start with the Department of Behavioral Health. And we need to make sure that we're getting out the information from the mobile crisis unit, which is now the community response team, to be in some of these different hot spots, across the ward, making sure that the information is getting out there. Also working with the other elements of DC Health to be in spaces just like this, looking at what we have inside of DCPS and with our charter schools to make sure that part of the curriculum includes education around drug use. We're partnering with churches through the Mayor's Office on Religious Affairs to get that information out there as well. Then looking at what do we have in partnership with DPR and all of these agencies where we're going into the rec centers. So trying to tap into every sphere of life where our people are at, making sure that they get the information. Then there has to be a strategy to get onto the radio, onto social media where many of our people at, and they're receiving this information, but it just can't be a one-time type of thing. These are things that we have to do consistently and making sure that we're engaging folks, especially at early childhood education levels and on the way up, so that they can grow up in an atmosphere and a culture so that they can understand the impact of these things.
Prior to becoming a council member, I did an extensive amount of work in the community engaging families around youth violence in this community. In fact, Reverend Motley was one of the people that introduced me to this work right here in this community. And so I want to say thank you for that. But what I recognize is that when I interacted with a young man or young lady in the community, I figured that he or she or his family was interacting with other government agencies through the schools, through DBH, through mental health services, through food stamps, through public service, public awareness activities in the community. And so they were all interrelated. I don't know if you saw, but during the debate around the Secure DC Omnibus Bill, I introduced a part of that legislation to amend it to ensure that government agencies are working together. Because there's no way we're talking about a drug-free zone and not talking about ways to deal with mental health services, substance abuse services, job creation, family engagement, those type of things that are existing in the government but not interacting with each other. I support it and helped to push forward the NEAR Act introduced by Councilman McDuffie before I got into council. So as a council member, I got alongside of him to ensure we're able to introduce and right stand a public health approach to addressing public safety. And that doesn't mean locking everybody up, because some people need to go to jail. Yes, absolutely. But some people need services. And when we don't provide those services, we're in the state that we're in now, which is a crisis when it comes to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So a lot of this work is actually something that I've done as a principal of Blue High School, and recognizing that we want to make sure young people were able to come to school and soak up a quality education. We realized that there were lots of determinants, social determinants, that had to be addressed in the home to stabilize that home so young people can show up as best they can and receive support and instruction. So not only did we have, programs that ran through nonprofit organizations, we partnered with DC government organizations that supported the families who needed, whether it was food, we started a food pantry at Blue, whether it was violence interruption, we worked directly with the Peaceaholics, with Jahar Abraham and Ronald Moten, to make sure that young people had a safe way home before the district modeled that after the Safe Passage program after that. We made sure that we had outlets for families who needed opportunities to work. And not only did we do that through DOES, but as we built our new building, that $147 million brand new building that we wrestled from council's budget, we made sure that we had agencies within that space. We have a community health center that has exposure to the public when schools close. I don't know to what degree it's been utilized since I've been gone, but we made public spaces in the school for partnerships to exist to make sure that all the social determinants around crime, around addiction, around child education are addressed. Thank you.
Sam, I can't answer your question the way you want it. I think, well, I know DC does have residential rehab centers for people, and there's also dozens of other organizations that are rehab centers, residential, where people can go get support. And I hope they do. I wish for everyone in my community to be free from substance abuse and addiction. A lot of the problems that we have, I think there are causes related to things that originally the council and the mayor created. It was like 8 or 9 years ago that DC, as a progressive city, legalized marijuana. And I think that tolerating and normalizing drug culture is one of the reasons why substance abuse has increased. And so that's a little bit more of the root cause that I wish didn't happen. And I think that's continuing to make it harder to overcome these obstacles with people struggling with drug addiction. So maybe my other multi-agency would be trying to legalize drug use again, or maybe with the current, right now it's super accessible to get yourself your own prescription. I think that if we made it more restrictive, that would help kids and other people struggling with substance abuse.
Are there any rebuttals? Next question.
So I guess I'm starting with Councilmember White. If you look west of the Anacostia River, that area, and Adolfo mentioned that earlier. If you look west of the Anacostia River years ago, it was a pretty lousy neighborhood. I mean, it was a lot of taxi cab repair shops. It was, some clubs. It was peep shows. That was that area along there. And then, of course, the stadium comes, which gives a lot of development to that part of the area. And I think there was even an effort, was it Fenty or Williams? I'm not sure. One of them, they wanted to do something with Poplar Point on this side of the river. So my question is, what's happened over there. Of course, that's now Ward 8. It was 6 then. But what's your view on development on this side of the river, places like Poplar Point? Do you want to see more development over here?
I believe that Ward 8 should have the same amenities everyone else has throughout the city. We worked very hard to create some of that at Sycamore and Oak. I don't know if you know, but we have 20 African-American businesses right here in Ward 8 new at Sycamore and Oak. In fact, we had an event there Thursday night. And so the reality is we got a long way to go. In fact, John store was threatening to close here in Ward 8, and we fought to keep that open. DC is in a peculiar place because we're going to lose a lot of businesses. We lost 3 CVS's, 2 Walmarts, Walgreens, a number of stores. And so we have to infuse capital to ensure we can keep our businesses here in the district without displacing people. So one of the things that I've worked on in certain places like Anacostia is this, it's called displacement free zones. While the taxes go up, that we ensure that people who own homes won't get displaced, because as you build the buildings, you must also build on the people. And so we want to freeze the taxes in those areas hardest hit by development to ensure that people can stay here and thrive here in our community. Because we see what happened to Shaw, U Street, 8th Street, all across the district. When we improve those areas, most people that look like us, that grew up with us, moved out or got displaced across the city. So we want to shore that up.
Thank you for the question. So ultimately, in regards to development, we have to recognize that development is an economic driver. What we create in the amenities that we want to have in our community, a lot of that, when businesses make those decisions, they make those decisions based upon several metrics. One of them is the tax base of the residents in that community. So one of the things that we have to do with development is make sure that our people are growing with the opportunity. That means we have to make sure there are jobs that pay a living wage for our residents when they want to look for home ownership in a ward that has nearly 70% renters. We have to make sure there are opportunities for us to be a part of the development that comes, whether we are building programs for folks to work on those development projects, or make sure that they're working within the businesses that will be in those developmental projects. Because without that, displacement is guaranteed to happen. So the opportunities have to first exist, and then the conversations around what we need to do to attain and maintain those have to happen after that.
I think the district puts up some pretty large obstacles for development. One's the Housing Production Trust Fund. And I think we've all heard of how developers can get these lots for $2, $17, whatever, which is pretty ridiculous. I think we should have a free market where a developer, there's an auction, and whoever wants that property the most will pay top dollar for it. And then they can use that land and those resources for that area will be most profitable to them. And that way, instead of having the DC government try to do all the planning, you just let the developers do the planning. And so that's a lot more. So then the taxpayers aren't at a loss when the district misplans things. Another thing Treon talked about, losing businesses, you need to inject capital. Maybe if a business is losing business, we shouldn't have advocating for like a socialist form of government where we subsidize failing businesses like Georgina's, for example. We should let businesses die and let other businesses who can provide better goods and services because of a profit incentive move into those areas. Otherwise, you have stagnant businesses that where the community could get a better one, but instead we're just subsidizing poor businesses. And finally, if you own a home, you won't get displaced. I'm pretty sure eminent domain happened once in Northwest for like the bus area. Tran could explain how people who own their own homes are getting displaced. I didn't know that was happening.
I think what's important for us to recognize is the landscape of the ward and what do we have and how we can improve on those things. So we see right now, we have St. Elizabeth's campus. There's a master plan for St. Elizabeth's campus. What does that look like to make sure that the people who live here can participate in the growth and the development of the economy here? So as we build up, or as we develop plans to build up the ward, we also have to develop plans to build up the people who live here in the ward so they can participate in that economy. We have to make sure that we develop the skill set, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters, but we also have to make sure we develop the engineers, the people who can understand how to put these things together. We have to also help develop people to move from dependency to self-sufficiency so that they can participate in the economy when it does come. We have what is now being called the Bridge District, which at one point was Columbian Quarters. Where are the people going to be at in the development of that property as well? And then we have corridors such as what is now the Congress Heights Main Streets, where we're looking to have a Congress Heights Business Improvement District. So there's opportunity for us to do those things, but we also have to develop the people who even understand what it means to build up the economy. And we have to make sure that we're investing in our high schools, whether they're public or charter schools, to get people to understand entrepreneurship and invest in their own community.
Any rebuttals?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you. I do have a rebuttal in regards to the statement that DC should not be involved in development, that we should give it over to the developers. I'm against that. Developers are in business to make money. And we want to make, as a council member, I often meet with developers to make sure they are good for the community. It's community engagement, and there's an underlying benefit for the community. So we created several CBAs, which is community benefit agreements, to ensure that capital is also infused into our local football teams, our dance teams, our schools, our after-school programs, because without that, people take that money back to Stafford, Virginia, West Virginia, and not do any investment into our community.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Any other rebuttals?
Yes. Yeah. Developers are the ones building our homes and building units. And if they had a lot more freedoms, we'd have a lot more housing. Take a look at Chinatown. We have it's regulation, which is causing these retail spaces to stay commercial and not being transferred to residential. If there were fewer regulations and more freedom, developers can make housing a lot easier and increasing the supply.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, next question. This question is a two-part question. We will start with Rahman Branch. First part of the question is a yes or no answer, and we'll go straight down the line. The second part of the question is a narrative. Here's the first part of the question. Should officers have the right to review body cam footage prior to filing reports? Yes or no?
Yes? I don't know.
Yes.
No.
Second part of the question, starting again with Rahman Branch. How would you hold MPD accountable for code violations, violations of police policy, or district laws?
So I think there are already conversations around a review board that should be instituted for police. I think that ultimately every government agency, every group that works for people should be responsible to respond to people. And so there has to be a way to hold that organization responsible for the outcomes that it produces for its residents. If we look at it like a service model, like every other government service model, accountability has to come through an organization to the people it's required to serve.
Yeah, I concur. Well, there's we have oversight committee meetings in the spring, and so that's my answer for that.
We have to strengthen the Office of Police Complaints and make sure that they have the right power and work with the police union and with the mayor's office, and then make sure that council can be a third part of that conversation as well, because we just can't have an office that just makes recommendations. The Office of Police Complaints needs to be able to have some power to exact any means of corrective action.
First, we have to start hiring more officers from our community. The data reflects that when an officer come or have empathy for the community, he or she is better suited to serve in that community. Secondly, we have to hold the officers accountable as well as the people. I think there has been a situation where 37 officers got fired for convictions and got rehired and got paid over $500,000 in back pay. And that sends a bad message to police who are doing the right thing, because not all police are bad. And thirdly, we have performance oversight on the council. We have the ability to sit in front of the police chief, the Office of Police Complaints, and other government agencies to hold them accountable. And fourthly, we have the right to make laws. As a council member, our primary responsibility is to make laws and legislation that's just and equitable for the District of Columbia all around the board, including MPD.
Any rebuttals? Next question.
All right, we're going to start with Nate. And my question for all the candidates is, how would you address the proliferation of illegal guns in Ward 8 through legislation and or collaboration with government agencies?
Let's start with what I wouldn't do. Gun buybacks don't work. You can look at data from Florida in the 90s. They don't do it. Right now, there's multiple programs where you can snitch on people and get rewarded for it. And as a matter of how many guns the MPD has collected over the past few years, the collection of guns has increased, but homicides have not decreased. So collecting guns is not working. It hasn't worked. And so I know that's what wouldn't work. I think this is really a mayor's office thing. I'm a service member, been in the Army 16 years, reserves, and I should be able to get a conceal and carry, but the 2-hour legal requirement isn't easy for me. It isn't available for me. I've called MPD. And so there's still these barriers for people who meet the qualifications, but I have to pay hundreds of dollars to some third party to go through the legal training. And so this legal training should be acceptable. My solution is that Second Amendment should really be prioritized, allowing people who are able to protect themselves, and even the most vulnerable peoples of our society, they should have access to legal guns. And that's a solution that I think will be a lot better than the one I mentioned earlier.
I think ultimately we're gonna have to figure out how will we work with our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia, where those gun laws are a whole lot more loose than the District of Columbia, and see what kind of partnership that we can have with those different jurisdictions as it pertains to the purchase of guns. Then we have to make sure that enforcement here on this end is really key. One of the things I've seen recently, MPD has began to start doing some more traffic stops and creating checkpoints to where they recover some of the legal guns. But we also have to make sure that that's balanced out with making sure that these officers aren't violating people's civil rights and human rights as they attempt to remove those guns, those illegal guns off the streets. But ultimately, because we're not manufacturing the guns in the District of Columbia, and you just can't walk into Walmart here and buy a gun, we have to be in partnership and in concert with the different jurisdictions that surround DC.
First of all, DC has some of the most strictest gun laws in the country. In fact, we just got the ability to carry a concealed weapon in the last couple of years, when other states have had it historically for a very long time. The issue is that some of the guns are coming from our partnering cities. And so what we do as a city, we partner with the federal government to ensure that people are held accountable. If you look at the data, there was about 37% of the gun cases last year faced conviction. That means all the other cases got dropped or dismissed or never faced a conviction. So we have to work closely with strengthening our police department with detectives and working with our federal prosecutors to ensure that those who are caught with guns are held accountable. How many times have you seen on the news, this person got caught with a gun, came home, caught with a gun, came home, and he or she didn't kill 3 people? Because the laws are in place, but we have to enforce those laws and make sure we're working with our federal partners to get those guns off the streets. One of the things we've done on the council was made stricter penalties for ghost guns. There are a lot of guns that's been put together inside of homes because you can order them online. And as a result, people are putting together fully automatic weapons inside their home and shoot up the neighborhood. We just had a shooting up here a week and a half ago, 200 steps from here. You go up Martin Luther King Avenue, you had a shooting up there, automatic weapons, over 30, 40 rounds on the ground from these ghost guns and these machine guns in our community.
So I think there has to be greater collaboration. I think when you have experts in law enforcement who've been trying to solve this riddle for so long, in a district like DC, where there are some nearly 20 different law enforcement agencies, greater collaboration around the data that is existing and the jurisdictions that surround DC who also identify and understand who are selling and trafficking guns. Once you share that information to a more robust degree, I think you have the data to then connect the dots and make the arrests that you need to make around the proliferation of guns.
Any rebuttals? Jonathan first started. So any rebuttals? Okay, next question.
Mr. Adolfo, okay. Some have called Ward 8 a food desert. And personally, I question that to some degree. I know there are 2 supermarkets. There's a Good Hope Safeway, and then there's the Giant that Councilmember White was talking about earlier that apparently is still going to be here. But at the same time, you've got Eastover, which isn't that far, and you got the Giant there. You got Navy Yard. There's Harris Teeter over there. And of course, I know the mayor has tried to get a good food market here. She paid some guy $1 million to open a store at South Capitol in Atlantic, and it went out of business. So I guess my question is, what are your ideas for bringing stores to the ward and supporting them to the degree that they actually succeed?
Well, one of the things I think that is important is to look at the size of the markets that we are talking about bringing and the quality of the food and the items that they're talking about having. When I went to shop at Good Food Market, many of the items in there didn't reflect what some of the needs were of the residents in the community. So I understand the need for us to have healthier food options, and I agree that we definitely should, but we also have to have some of the items in there that people want to have and want to purchase, and make sure that the prices that people can afford. So, and we can get many of those types of markets in the ward, and we're just going to have the political will to make sure that they're funded through the deputy mayor for economic planning and development. But then there's also what we currently have. We have a variety of different farmers markets in the ward that we should be working with to help them scale up so that they can increase the capacity for making sure that we can get residents who already have a relationship to these farmers markets the items that they need. For example, we have the Ward 8 Farmers Market, which already has a history in the ward, 20 years. And then there are a variety of other farmers markets that have popped up along the ward. We need to support those as well, and making sure that we can get those into populations where we have people who are experiencing what we call a food desert, based upon the level of density in the ward. So we can get those into those types of environments. I think we'll be better served.
I believe that we are what we eat. And quite simply, it's not just the food that's available, but it's access to quality food in our community. And I believe that we've started the movement in the right direction to open up 2 grocery stores in Ward 8. One was a fresh food factory, and as you alluded to, the Good Food Market that closed down. I'm disappointed that happened, as I talked about some of the local stores that closed, but we can't just settle for that. And so I'm in conversation with Michaels to, one, they're in court right now trying to get that person out of their lease so we can get a new store there. But we just opened up the fresh food factory at Sycamore Oak and Congress Heights. We want to do more. In fact, I meet with the mayor and some other grocery options in May to sift through what are some of our other options to bring fresh grocery options here in Ward 8. I went to Africa, and I was in a small village and realized how they grew that village from a small garden into a substantial garden that people ate off from that village. And so we duplicated that with DC Greens at the Weller Auction Run, the biggest, most beautiful garden we have in Washington, DC, that started under my leadership. I believe that we are agricultural people, and we can't simply depend on big grocery stores to bring us food. We can grow our own produce in our community. I also implemented a program called Produce RX at Giant that gave people $20 a week to use fruits and vegetables to be a healing and source of food for our community. So it's about us being visionaries and sticking to that vision to move the world forward. Thank you.
So I think one of the things that has to be addressed, as a principal, I would see so many young people come into school carrying green chips and blue juice and things to that degree. And we gotta, one of the things we have to first identify with the local stores that do sell varying items. And I have a couple Ballou alumni in the building who recognize that, Mr. Branch used to have a really big trash can at the front door. So we came in with that blue juice and that green chips, and those things hit the trash can. And we made sure that we provided healthy options for you in the buildings. That's the first step in us trying to make sure that we are a healthier community. The second piece of that is those stores that are selling things that we know are detrimental to our young people, that are detrimental to our families, until we do get another large grocer in the area to encourage and work with them around some of the healthy food grants that exist, and to have their selections change a bit as well, making sure that they now offer opportunities for a healthier lifestyle to our residents. And then again, while we're building up and developing the workforce of our ward with folks who have the money to now have the taxable income that brings big box stores here, I can't stress enough, developers make decisions on where they'll do business based upon the tax base in that community. We'll then get a little more from the big businesses, but the ones that are here, we have to support them in delivering better options to our families.
All right. There's actually an additional grocery store, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling has a commissary, which
Can the public use that?
not now, because after they go bowling at bowling, they could. But anyway, it's still a store, even though it's restricted to government employees. But for the record, that adds. There's really 8 grocery stores within a half-mile radius from the borders of Ward 8. So I also don't like the food desert idea. I think it's not accurate. There's plenty of places to get food. I think one solution, which none of us could help, is have the judicial department prosecute more. Councilmember White mentioned earlier, like 37% of gun cases aren't prosecuted. When our judicial branch doesn't prosecute, that incentivizes crime because it doesn't punish it. And the reason Giant was going to close is a lot of it was theft, organized and maybe less organized. They should have kept that other door shut because we need to ensure corporations can make a profit and operate safely. And I'm also, my other option is we can lower corporate tax rates so businesses can survive better and have more margins to, just make it easier to do business here. I'm also curious, what if we said you couldn't buy junk food with EBT? That's just a theory. I just thought about it. Maybe we can look at that.
Any rebuttals? Thank you. I think that the next time I'm going to set this up, it's going to be a conversation because I need to have a conversation with some of them, to be honest with you. But that's for another time. Next question is a two-part question. The first part, this will test your knowledge of the budget. The mayor has released the FY25 budget that many advocates maintain will drastically cut social safety net programs that could substantially impact Ward 8 residents. Name one item in the budget that you feel benefits Ward 8. Second part, what cuts would you advocate be restored in a final budget outcome? And we begin with, who would you start with?
I think Adolfo said it.
Okay, so to go with Councilmember White.
Okay, this is one of the worst budgets I've ever seen in my last 7 years as a council member. There's a narrative that DC don't have the money. I say that's not true. DC used to have a budget of 19.7 billion. Our budget now is 20.9 billion. So you do the math. It's not a matter of lack. It's a matter of priority. We have to prioritize what we want to see happen with this budget all across the city. So I see the budget as a more document. I think one of the things we did in this budget was we did more around building buildings that allow people to come, like the Department of Health is now in Ward 8. I think that's good to have that in a place where we have some of the highest health disparities in 7 to 8 East Anacostia River. Well, some of the things I see that we need to be restored is ERAP, Emergency Rental Assistance Program. There are too many people that's facing evictions. I've been dealing with it all weekend long. Also, people may not know, but there are a lot of people that's on what's this called? I forgot all the name of it, but it's basically rapid rehousing that was housed through rapid rehousing through Department DHS that's going to become homeless in the next 60 days. I talked to Director Zylander Friday about this. There's a long list of people who become homeless. I think that another thing they need to restore is money for HPAP. We talk about Mayor did this thing about all these people, black people gonna get home ownership, and when they got to the finish line, most people couldn't close. And so we talk about building wealth and keeping people in DC. We have to restore money to the budget, especially for our education system. We're taking a tremendous hit. We should never, ever cut budgets for schools, ever. Thank you.
Repeat the question again, please.
The mayor has
Well, just the question piece. I remember the name.
name one item in the budget that you feel benefits Ward 8. Second part, what cuts would you advocate be restored in a final budget?
So I think the budget for Department of Health and its placement in Ward 8 is actually a good thing. I think that speaks to identifying a need here in the ward and addressing it directly. As a career educator, I am against every cut that impacts the investment in education in our city. I do believe that there is a power in the investment of steel and glass and buildings, but if we don't make an investment in the human beings who are here, we have no guarantee that the next crop of young people will be better human beings, and that's as we get older. So, your purse strings kind of dictate your priorities. And I think at the end of the day, if we really want to see DC grow and improve to the way that we're determining that we want it to, we have to make a very solid investment in youth development and in education.
I don't think the mayor's special interest offices benefit Ward 8. And also, I think something we should realize with Councilmember White is the HPAP funding, that when you give people money to buy a house, you're increasing the price of housing when you are subsidizing different people. Otherwise, if they didn't have those subsidies, the prices would go down. This is basic economics and the reason why our socialized system of housing increases the cost of housing by limiting the supply and increasing the demand. Happy to talk about it later.
The main area I think that's really important that I think benefits Ward 8 the most is the funding going to the Department of Employment Services. Through that, we see a variety of different options for our young people to succeed. School year internship program is one of them. If we're talking about making sure our children are involved in activities that can help them grow, and we're looking at our future of economic development, making sure that that institution has the funding that it needs prepares us for long-term success. At the same time, something that I definitely wouldn't want to see reduced in funding is our educational opportunities through DCPS. We must make sure that we support our educators. We must make sure that the buildings that our children are in are adequate and they're funded at the level that they need to be funded, which is part of the capital budget. But we got to make sure that we're taking care of our educators and the buildings where our children are at.
Any rebuttals? Next question.
Yes, sir. We will start with Mr. Branch. If each of y'all can please explain what makes you the best option for Ward 8, given the juncture that we're in DC.
So thank you for the question. At the end of the day, I think we're at a crossroads here in Ward 8. We have a very new, diverse ward that represents lots of different interests. As someone who's experienced leadership, who's led staff, who've managed budgets, and who in his career has helped develop other leaders, we have to recognize what it takes to build coalition and consensus, to identify a set of priorities, and to implement them in a way that makes everyone feel that their voice is heard, their needs are addressed and supported, and if they're not directly addressed and supported, how we're going to then mitigate that later. I think the other thing that has to be considered in this space is that, we're in a place right now where Ward 8 has more children than any other ward in the District of Columbia. I'm the only person on this panel here who has made sure that I've invested in young people becoming better than us. I am an educator. I've worked with children and their families around all the social determinants towards making education happen or not happen. And I think with having more children in the ward than any other ward in the district, if elected, we'd have the most informed, experienced person around education on the council representing the needs of this community, but that would also transcend to children throughout the district. Thank you.
I think if I got on the council, I think I would be the best option for Ward 8 because I'd probably be a lot more combative during the oversight hearings. Currently, oversight hearings are pretty short, and it depends on. Oh man, I woke up with Rockman's watch. It's just in general, DC Council, pretty much everyone's a Democrat, especially Kenny McDuffie, who is a Democrat through and through. And so I think what I would be as a council member, as a Republican, is I would bring that diversity perspective. I would be pumping the brakes a little bit on this progressive spending and hopefully cut down some of the crazy programs that end up getting our children killed, like violence interrupters.
When I look at what we're facing in our community right now, one of the biggest issues that we face is housing. One of the biggest issues that I've been able to help residents with is getting the Department of Buildings to come out, inspect, hold property owners accountable. When I look at the community and I see what we're talking about with public safety, it's a plethora of different things that we can all address, but we need to make sure that there's somebody who can understand these things and who can do something as cliche-ish as it sounds, and that's get back to the basics. We have to make sure that the infrastructure in our community is where it needs to be. We have to make sure that our community is cleaned up. We have to make sure that our community is a place where people see it as a place that they want to live and people want to come and visit. We have to have somebody who is on the ground making sure that these things happen. And no matter how you may see me or what you may know me from, but one thing you can definitely make sure you know is that I'm here on the ground every day, making sure that we can keep our community clean, that we can connect people to the resources that they need. This is why I think I'm the best choice.
My name is Treyon White, and I'm the council member of the Great Ward 8. If anybody know anything about me, I've been consistently involved in bettering our community since I was 17 years old. Because I made a promise to God, if you allow me to make it out and become somebody, I come back and give back to my community. And ever since that day I made that promise, I've been doing just that in different capacities, from the school board to working with the Ward 8 Dems, to being a council member, to just being a human being here in our community. And I think regardless of title, we all have a role and responsibility of making Ward 8 reach its maximum potential. and I'm delivering on my promises. I made a promise that as growing up, I had access to recreation. Right now, we're building 6 new recreation centers, brand new off the ground here in Ward 8. I talked about building a senior wellness center, which over 65 seniors came down to the council, so they want a new senior wellness center. That's getting built in the back of Kramer Middle School next year, starting next year. I made a promise about bringing more businesses owned by us in our community. And right now, we have 20 brand new businesses in Sycamore Oak, including 2 restaurants just opened up in Ward 8 in the last 2 years. There was a conversation about building a healthcare system in Ward 8 long before I got there, right? And I partnered with Councilmember Vincent Gray and my other colleagues and the mayor's office to ensure we building a brand new hospital right here in Ward 8 on St. Louis East Campus. We also have a urgent care facility right here in Ward 8. And so we're not just talking to talk. I'm the most qualified. There's nobody on this panel that ever passed legislation as a council member except for me. There's no one who ever crossed the aisle, work with the colleagues to get things done in the budget except for me. In fact, new council members lose the right to have a committee for 2 years. And Ward 8 don't have the affordability or luxury to lose 2 years of service and access to responsibilities here on the council.
Sorry, Councilmember, time.
I apologize. I have another responsibility to be to at 3 o'clock, and I had to be the council member and the candidate at the same time. So I want to thank you all for having me to here today. Any questions I'm able to answer, you can send them to my text 202-270-7271. Again, 202-270-7271. Thank you guys for having me. Take care. And God bless.
Did you want to give a closing statement?
That was it.
Okay, that was it. It's all good. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. And as we let the council member, I know he has to leave and there are others that have to leave, we're going to ask some of the members of the audience to ask questions. I'm going to first call up Pillars of Success and Brother Sabat. Brother Sabat, you can come and ask your question. Come to the center aisle and and he'll hand you the mic. 45-second answers. Brother Burks, 45-second answer. It's on. Oh.
Can you hear me? All right. Good evening, everybody. So what specific policies or programs do you propose to support the successful reintegration or return of citizens into society and reduce recidivism rates in your community, in our community?
That would go to Rockland Branch.
Thank you for the question. One of the things the one thing I've been pushing for more than anything else, right now in the district, there's something called the CBE, right? And CBE programs cordoned off, I think it's $2 billion of the $20 billion to make sure they do business with the groups that are identified as CBEs. I've been pushing for and discussing for a long time, how do we do the same thing for returning citizen businesses? The mayor's been on record as saying when folks come home, they either have trouble getting hired, well, maybe we should support them in starting business. In that space, if we're to make sure that we cordoned off maybe 200 million, which is 1% of a $20 billion government, we would have a way for returning citizens to establish businesses and then hire other returning citizens as well, friends, family, etc. We could build a more robust entrepreneurship space with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I go to the DC jail occasionally to visit all the J6ers, and I do a phone call every night, 9 p.m. And so I've learned a lot about the conditions since hundreds of people have been kept in there. I think we need work programs. Businesses need the ability to give people meaningful work opportunities while they're incarcerated to help build those skills so they can have a usable skill with which they can provide for themselves and their family when they get out. So making sure that work opportunities happen behind bars.
The first thing we need to do is make sure they have a place to return to. So I want to make sure that we're working with the federal government to make sure that there are spaces here for our returning citizens to come to. In addition to that, working with the men's shelters that we have so that they can have spaces that are specifically available for returning citizens on that end. Then when we're looking at the mayor's office on returning citizens affairs, making sure that they have the dedicated funding to help our returning citizens get new ID cards, get connected to job training opportunities, the one like we have at the Infrastructure Academy with PEPCO.
How y'all doing? My name is Tyree Jones. I'm a Ward 8 member, returning citizen myself. I want to know, why aren't the community leaders responsible for developing long-term relationships with our youth and our community? What you guys think about that?
I think it's my turn to start. I think it's best for, yeah, as I started out with this forum, got to have strong families. Outcomes for kids are best with a mother and father who are married. Those outcomes include staying out of jail, graduating from high school, successfully achieving greater heights in their careers. So it really starts with strong families. And so I think we should have policies that don't break up families. Regrettably, there's a lot of welfare programs that pay moms to keep the fathers out of the homes. These are federal issues, not necessarily local, but when you have strong families, that's way more important than community leaders. But if you don't have parents, then yeah, someone needs to step in.
Well, I would tell you, as someone who has stepped into a leadership role, I come into this role having already pre-existing relationships in the community. One of the things I was saying to one of the participants here is that no matter win or lose, we already have relationships in the community that we're working on. This only helps to enhance our ability to service the people who we're already in community with. For example, we take children from Wingate on college tours, already working in Barry Farm Rec Center with some of the children who are in the local community. And these are things that we can enhance when we step into greater levels of responsibility. So we should be electing leaders who already have these relationships so that they can continue to grow.
Leading Ballou High School for a decade, a lot of my young people are now young adults. I now have the privilege of not just being someone who's worked with them from their youth and teenage years. I now actually support them as they parent their own children. So those long-term relationships are something that's not just a belief of mine, it's a bedrock of how I live my existence in Ward 8. I think what happens with those thousands of young people is now we're following them in career choices. We're supporting them and making sure that they have that kind of programming that they need to go into, whether it's DC government jobs, CTE training and programs. And the programs that we're looking at doing around the ward only exist because during my time at Ballou, we had a central hub for it. Now it's fallen apart, and those things have to exist in small spaces because we need to get back to making sure leaders like myself can build coalition around those goals for young people.
Would a representative from ETAP please approach? Elder Tenant Association Presidents and Presenters.
Good afternoon. As he said, I represent elders who live in senior buildings and homeowners. And we have a lot of issues and concerns about security and upgrading and upkeeping of our buildings. And we're the most vulnerable population. And I was just talking with my sister who lives across the street from Ballou. I graduated, well, I went to Ballou in 71 before you was born. But anyway, and we got 5 generations here. And to stay here, some of these folks have downsized their house and moved into apartments. We want to stay. I've earned the right to stay. I think we should hold the developers responsible, put some kind of contract in there where they have to upgrade, because where the system falls apart is the management that these developers bring,
Mama
who
B.
disrespect us.
Mama B.
Uh-oh.
No, don't. Just ask your question, Mama. Just ask your question, Mama B. Come on.
Hold it up.
Come on, ask your question, Mama B.
Okay. Would you make policies when you let these developers come in that they must bring in qualified management and have budgets that upgrade and maintain our buildings? 100 people going in and out the door, and you won't change it in 20 years. It's a beautiful building. You like the turnover, you know. Okay, excuse me. Let me sit down, because I'm angry at developers who are dropping the ball.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that I realized in this process of working in the tenant advocacy space is that we can have the Department of Buildings come out, but we don't have enough inspectors to make sure that they can do it on a regular basis. And in addition to that, we have a lot of property owners who owe the government money currently. So we have to work with the Attorney General's office to make sure that they're holding those property owners accountable and delivering on those infractions. But ultimately, we got to make sure that we pass legislation to make sure that the Department of Buildings are conducting regularly scheduled inspections based upon the size of the building and the age of the building. The older the building is, the larger the building is, the more inspections it's going to need.
So I think that's a wonderful question, and thank you for the narrative before that. I think one of the things that absolutely has to happen more times than not when we see government agencies that are maybe dropping the ball on issues, oftentimes it doesn't necessarily require new legislation. It needs to have staffing. It needs to have people who are being trained to take on those jobs, to do those things well. So I'm not sure if it's as much a legislative piece currently until we make sure that they implement the work of, you know, holding those inspections, making sure they implement the work of holding building owners accountable.
Just considering the idea on someone who's earned the right to stay, I'm not completely sure housing is a human right. There's like, we have rights, human rights, civil rights. We have all these rights everywhere. Pretty soon there'll be nothing left. And, but really, if you own your home, then I think you've, and then no one can make you move. I think, so that is, I think that's different. You don't just earn the right to stay somewhere because you've paid rent. Otherwise, happy to discuss that more with you later.
Just to conclude, the new director of housing has a 3-year plan to turn things around, and I'm really encouraged by what he's doing. And will y'all work with him and don't make him a scapegoat when people like him get in office, or make sure he don't get in office. I'm sorry, I gotta run.
Thank you, Mama B.
B.
Thank you, Mama B. We're going to go to bullet rounds, which are yes or no or targeted questions, starting with Sam Ford.
Okay, so I can ask some bullet questions that I can ask them. Okay, so here, I don't know, it was 20 years ago, I did a moderating forum here in Ward 8. And something was said that I still remember. You all, if you know here, you know Sandra Siggers. And we were talking to her, and she said, don't build another house here because we cannot afford it. My bullet question is, do y'all understand that sentiment?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So my question then, after asking that, is what thoughts, ideas do you have for more efforts to keep current homeowners in Ward 8, sort of like this lady was just saying, in Ward 8, or at least in DC?
So I think a few things we could consider doing to address that issue. One very big one is the tax deferral program. Lots of times we have family members who will pass away. They've had their taxes deferred for a long time. The inheritor of that home is then saddled with a multi-year tax bill that oftentimes they have to pay off in 90 days. So it almost helps accelerate gentrification. So if I've inherited my grandmother's house, maybe she's had a tax deferral program for a decade at $10,000 a year. I'm saddled with that debt. So one way to make sure that residents get to stay is to address that tax deferral program and eradicate that, especially for our legacy residents. Another thing that we have to make sure we do is look at all the housing that is vacant and blighted and really aggressively address making those available to existing residents. I think of Anita Foster, a young woman who did it at Ballou all the right way, right school, SGA president, worked on Congress, interned for Oprah, can't buy in DC because her hometown is now too expensive.
I'm curious if that's ever happened to anyone in this room. They inherited a home, but the heritage tax made it so they couldn't get it. Has that happened for anyone? Do you know people for whom it's happened? You do? Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, my taxes have gone up every year as a homeowner, and it's to fund all these programs that end up hurting our kids and just causing other ailments. So yeah, my solution is let's stop the spending, lower it, and so our property taxes don't increase, so people's mortgages escrows don't increase. And I think that's how you keep people who own their homes to the ability to stay in it, lower the taxes.
I think there are several ways for us to make sure that people can definitely stay in this community. We got the HPAP program, but something more important is we got to have people restore and rebuild their credit if they're living at crisis. So we have home buyers clubs. For example, what we see on St. Elizabeth's campus, there were properties that were built, and we made sure that there were at least 10% of those that were at the affordable, deeply affordable rates. But you also had to be part of the home buyers club to repair your credit for those who were at crisis. And we can do that at all of the developments that are receiving government funding. We also have to make sure that the new housing that is being built is not concentrated in one area. But most importantly, when we look at the public housing and we look at some of the other market rate housing that we have that are available for low income residents, that those places are repaired. People are being self-evicted because we have property owners who are negligent in their duties and not repairing those, forcing people to self-evict.
Here are bulleted questions. These require yes or no answers. Do you support Initiative 83, supporting DC ranked choice elections for independents to vote in DC primaries? Yes or no, beginning with Salim.
No.
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 Do you support the mayor's sales tax increase for everyone? Yes or no? Or do you have an alternative tax increase idea to generate revenues? Starting with Rahman.
No, and I don't have an alternative.
No.
Yes, and we have an alternative where we can place a tax on gas.
But you do support the mayor's sales tax increase?
Yes.
If you win the primary, would you commit to publicly supporting a call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? Yes or no? Starting with Nate.
No.
I would support a permanent call for a ceasefire in Southeast DC.
Yeah, my focus would be on a ceasefire in Southeast DC as well.
So is that a no for supporting a permanent ceasefire in Gaza?
So for me, I would call for that, but at the end of the day, I think the issues here require a hyper focus that makes this more paramount to me.
Now, I can make the argument that what happens over there also happens here. And they're always connected. Hold on, Reverend, hold on, Motley. I can make the case. I just want to get your answer as to whether or not is this okay? Then his answer would be that he would not call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
Hold on, you heard my answer, right?
I want to hear it again.
I said yes.
Okay.
And I said I want to make sure I spotlight the issues that exist
Fair
here
enough.
primarily.
Fair enough. Celine, do you want to clarify your answer?
No, my answer doesn't need clarification. My first concern are the residents of the District of Columbia, and my heart goes out to people all across the world. I don't want to see violence happen anywhere, but my primary response to action is for the residents of the District of Columbia. But no, we don't want to see violence happen anywhere in the world.
Okay. Next, excuse me, everyone. Next question. This is a yes or no. This is a yes or no answer. In the Justice Policy Institute report, Missed Opportunities, Why Inaction on Preventive Measures Undermines Public Safety in Washington, D.C., it mentions use of cash assistance or basic income programs for youth to address violence. In Wilmington, Delaware, Stockton, California, and Gainesville, Florida, cash assistance programs to youth have resulted in reduced violence, greater civic engagement, and more awareness of self-care and health outcomes. Would you support or initiate legislation for a DC government-funded program of cash assistance for youth? Yes or no? Starting with Celine.
Yes.
No.
No.
All right, we're going to start with Mr. Branch. Mayoral control of schools, yes or no?
Yes.
No. I don't know.
No.
Okay. Penalties. Penalties for parents of truant students.
Yes.
Yes.
I wonder how effective it is, but yes.
Okay, no problem. Last yes or no question, and with permission, I'm going to add another part. If you were to win this election, would you include one of your opponents in your council office? If so, who?
Who's starting?
Oh, Celine.
Oh.
Sorry.
So, contrary to popular belief, I like Rockmont Branch. I think he's a brilliant man, and I would definitely want to consult him as it pertains to matters of not just education, but also how do we make sure we effectively engage young people.
You said, would I include them in the? I don't know. I can't answer that question just yet. I have no idea.
I'd keep the current council member around and his staff for constituent services and just keeping the same policies for internal operations.
We will have one last bullet question. We will have one question from the audience, and then we will go to closing remarks. And it's along the lines of the question that was just asked. Pick an opponent, and in one word or sentence, describe a good quality of that opponent. Do not pick an opponent that was already picked. We will start with Celine.
I just picked one.
You did. So we'll go with Rahman. Pick an opponent, and in one word or sentence, describe a good quality of that opponent. Do not pick an opponent already picked.
Trayon White, huge heart, really cares about the community.
Salim here's a good leader, undisputedly.
We will have one question from the audience. Whoever wants to ask a question. I will start with you, and then I'll go to Reverend Motley, and then I'll go to Elizabeth, and that will close the audience questions. Make sure your questions are short and sweet.
I want to know.
Your name, sir?
I'm sorry. My name is Daouda Lawrence, longtime resident of Ward 8, living in Anacostia. I want to know, why should I vote for one of y'all when I voted for Trayon White in the past? What is the major difference? What is your critique? What is it that he hasn't done that you could do better, and why?
Yeah, I think that's probably my like birthday cake question. You're surrounded by Democrats. I'm a Republican. I think you should vote for me because I'm saying let's stop all these ineffective programs which don't work. All the spending on different types of public safety things just hasn't worked. There's no results, and that's because a lot of it's you're just taking from people and creating some special team to solve the problems. So I think you should vote for me to get a new leaf. Let's stop these violence interrupter programs that kill kids like Devon McNeil, and let's stop all the spending which just keeps people in generational poverty with our various housing programs and other things. So if you want a real difference, I'm on the ballot, and you can vote for me in the general.
To be quite frank, I will make decisions in the office. We just recently had the crime bill where Ward 8 didn't get a vote. So I would definitely be someone who would make a decision.
Leadership has to know how to work with varying diverse populations. Leadership has to make sure they understand the needs of a community and meets those needs with real solutions and not rhetoric. Real leaders have to make sure that they have a plan for how the next crop of young people grow up to be successors of our work and not fall behind the things that we've gotten done. I'm the only one on this panel. I'm the only one of the candidates who are running that has experience in doing those things, both directly in my career and in my support of other people within their career. I've moved the needle for communities of culture, for Black communities throughout the country. I can do it here as well.
Reverend Motley. And Reverend, I just have to say, not a sermon, please, if just a question. Just a question. But that's okay. I know you got stuff to say.
No, I'm not going to preach. But thank you all for being here and doing this. Thank you to the moderators and everybody. I'm representing the Retirees for Accountability and the DC Veterans United for Statehood. Sam said something that really pricked me. When Anthony Williams put Poplar Point on the map, as he was leaving office, he gave it to Marion Barry to shepherd that process. But when the guy that came after Anthony Williams, and I'm not going to mention his name, he took that from Marion Barry. Just took it. We went and protested. We tried to get the people's attention, but he took it, and that's why we have the problem we have with Poplar Point now. There's been other incidences of people in political power who make decisions not in the interest of our people, but only for their own selfish gain or political expediency. What's going to make you any different from that guy that followed him or other people who make decisions that are not interested, they're not in our interest as a people? I'm finished. Thank you so much.
So thank you for the question. At the end of the day, I think there are different types of people who want to do this job. Some people want to get things done, and some people want to be somebody. All right. I think at the end of the day, it's a public service job. Your boss represents 80,000 residents and constituents. If you're making sure that you're building coalition, consistently checking in, lending an ear and a voice to them and for them, then you're always going to be in the right space. Now, will we always have consensus? Absolutely not. But the job of the council member is to be of service to the community. So if elected, when elected, don't come with me with celebration and roses. Come to me with a list in your hand. That's what public service is. Bring me your list. Here's what I want done. Here's my check-in date. Can we talk about how far you've gotten? And if you fail, I'd rather fail than quit. I think that's what we've been missing for a really long time in politics, is reminding ourselves that we're here of service to a population.
Reverend Molly, there's a giant budget for DC. It's like it just grows every single year. I'm probably one of the few candidates who's saying, let's cut the budget. Let's, with less money, less power, less special interests, less kickbacks, less corruption. I think I would serve the people best by decreasing the size of the government. If it did happen, it wouldn't even happen. Let's say I do get it. There's no way like one politician with my perspective would be able to do that. But that's how I would fight for the people, by decreasing all these slush funds, special projects, and just the general budget. I think is a lot of special interest.
You have to stay grounded. Brother Dawood, I remember me and him at Bus Boys and Poets to discuss issues around truancy, housing. Mr. Pinellas in the back does a lot of work on all issues as it pertains to the District of Columbia. These are the people who you have to stay connected to and be in concert and community with throughout the entire process, so that you stay grounded and making sure that you keep your ear to the ground and making sure that the needs of the residents are always at the forefront of everything, but that there's also that need and that requirement for them to be a part of the process. They must be included in the process, in the conversation, the decision-making, and the advocacy.
Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Reddick. I have a question that's about education. So right now there's a push to bring more equitable schools east of the river, meaning that school choice, what have you. A lot of times right now, it seems like it's only the public charter schools that are giving our students more opportunities as far as more choices, career and technical, like of that nature. My question is, do you guys support fair and equitable funding for DC public schools and the charter schools, meaning that they have the same opportunities when it comes to funding to be able to function and run in the city?
I'll start with that one. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. I think last time I checked the budget, it's like 50-50 approximately for public charter schools versus public schools. And I want what's best for the parents. I want whatever funding would give the parents the most choices for their students. And so I want it specifically say this means of fair, equitable, whatever. I want the results of most schools for the kids, by whatever means that is. And that may be public charter schools if they seem to provide more opportunities.
So So my follow-up to that would be, where are you getting the data to say that it's 50-50?
That was DC budget.
Because there's
yeah.
things such as at-risk funding, there's additional funding when it comes to behavioral health. I'm not just talking about what's coming out the mayor's budget. I'm talking about funding for special programming. There's a lot of different funding sources other than just what you see on the
Yeah, I looked at a budget like the last election cycle. Happy to be corrected and to be educated on specific things, but I thought that was approximately it.
Okay.
So to answer that, public schools have to be our first and foremost priority when we're looking at education as a public official. It's not the responsibility of the public, of elected officials, to make sure that private entities get the resources that they need. With that being said, we still have to make sure that we put the education of all our students first. And if we're going to have parents that want to make sure that their children have the best opportunities and they see fit that their child goes to school outside of the public education system, then we do have a responsibility to make sure that those institutions get the resources that they need.
So what you're saying is that it's the parents' responsibility to advocate for those additional funds if that's what they're seeking out? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying it's the responsibility as someone who's elected to have one, for us to establish an education committee so that we can look and see what are the needs of our educational institutions. But first and foremost, we have to take care of the public institutions. That's our first priority. However, if our children are in other educational spaces, we do owe them the right to make sure that they get the funding that they need so that they can stay on par and meet the standard of excellence.
Thank you.
Children of district residents, they deserve every resource, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, whatever school you're in, you deserve the resources, the full support of district government. We can't politicize the needs of children. So a lot of time the ban or the wraparound conversations, we're justifying why we're not giving every child what they deserve. Full answer, full stop, yes, there needs to be equitable funding.
Thank you.
Closing statements. We will start with Nate.
Name's Nate Derringe. Website's
You
Nate.
have 1 minute, Nate.
Great. Yeah, website's nateward8.com. Thanks for coming.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Salim Adolfo. I currently serve as the chair of ANCHC. I would like to tell you that I've been working in this community for a very long time, working in the spaces of advocacy around criminal justice issues, housing, food access, doing things from a commissioner standpoint in terms of constituent services, but most importantly, being on the ground every day, helping residents get access to the resources that they need. When I look out into the audience, I see a lot of people who are here who want something different. That means you wouldn't be here if you wanted the same thing that you've gotten. So you're looking for something different to happen in this community. And I'm telling you that we have to do that together. We have to be a part of that change together. And I'm somebody who's been in this space with many of you all working to bring that to existence. And I look forward to continuing that process with you.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Rahman Branch. I've been of service to Ward 8 since 2005, whether it's helping with our children, and thank you for allowing me to be a servant to your children for as long as I have, or whether it's being the director of the Mayor's Office on African American Affairs, where we made sure we codified an office that's built specifically to make sure we can incubate small businesses, we can provide after-school programs, health and wellness programs, senior programming. To date, no council members put money into that office that I got created, but I'm glad that we have it, because if elected, one of the first things I do is make sure we put the rhetoric to bed and we really be about action, is make sure there are funds available to support those realities. I'm the best selection for your vote today because my track record of service, and not just service riddled with failure, but absolute success for us, is a reason why you should continue to give me the opportunity to serve us in the capacity that still wins for you. Elect RahmanBranch.org, and thank you for having me.
Please give our candidates a round of applause. And also give a round of applause to our moderators as well. They spent time here, and to our timekeeper who kept us on time. Thank you all for coming. This event has been recorded, and we will be sending out the link so that people can send it to their friends and family and whoever else wants to listen and find out the views of these candidates. Thank you so much for coming.